want any food?
Sorry?
You want me to bring you any food?
No, I have my. Hey, Leonardo.
Hello there.
Hey, how are you?
Good, doing well.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Good to hear. I kind of lost my screen here, but whatever.
You just disappeared.
Hold on.
You're back.
Okay. I'm back.
Is that Lenny?
Is
Lenny,
that
it's
Joel? Hey, Joel.
How you doing?
Good. How's everything?
Good to hear. Going well for me too. I just want you to know your sitter is up on the top shelf waiting for you anytime you come by.
Okay. God willing, it'll be sooner than later.
God willing, that's nice. Very nice.
Okay. So we will begin. This is the way the community wants it. That's the way you'll have it. So yesterday, good morning, everybody. So this is a first time in many months we've had a face-to-face class, as well as, of course, Zoom. It is it's much easier to talk when you have people, because otherwise you feel like you're talking to the wall. And but my wife's been saying that for years, and now I know how she feels. So yesterday we read the Torah portion of Noach, and for those who were in shul yesterday, so some of the stuff will be repetitive, but mostly not. So as we concluded in Bereshit, God was upset with the world. God was upset with his creations. God was upset with the human beings, that they were Hamas. The Torah uses the word Hamas. Hamas means, as Rashi says, they were just thieves. They had no respect for somebody else's property, which included someone else's spouse. They just didn't care. They had this concept called prima nocta, which is what the British instituted in Scotland, is that before you got married, then the nobles had to have their way with the woman before she got married to her spouse. It was the law. And these people, it wasn't a law. That's what they did. They heard there was a wedding. They used to gate crash, and so that way they had prima nocta. And God said, I'm done. I'm done. What's interesting is God said, I regret. So to use the term regret is commentaries speak about it. And so there's one story in particular where somebody asked a rabbi, I think it was Rabbi Kiva actually, and asked the rabbi, but I'm not sure, so don't take me in it. But it was in Talmudic times. He said, if God is the infallible God, there's no fallibility with God, what does it mean he had regret? So the Rabbi Kiva, or whomever, answered, he says, when you have a child, you're so happy, and you're so proud, and you're so ecstatic, but you know that your child is going to misbehave. You know your child is going to be, it's going to be a tough road. You know when the child gets to teenager, Ariella, you know it's going to be unbelievably difficult, and they're going to test you in more ways than you could ever think of. So he says, does that stop you from praising your kids? Does that stop you from having kids? So God knew, but nonetheless, he did regret. He said, they're so out of control, and they have no respect. They have no morals, no values. So he decided he's going to destroy the world. However, he's going to save the world by Noah and his wife Nama, 3 sons and their wives. So they had 3 sons with their wives is 6. Noah and Nama is 8. So there's 8 people God said, I'm going to save. And the Torah tells us that Noach was a tzaddik. He was righteous in his generation, and he walked with God. So the commentaries we discussed yesterday, the commentaries say what was great about Noach is that he was both. He walked with God. So between him and God, he was a tzaddik. He also was a tzaddik with his generation. He was not, with God appeared to be super righteous, but yet still in business. He was not where he was nice to everybody else, but not nice to his family, right? He was a consistent fellow, right? And consistency is something that Judaism is. It's the reason why they asked you to have a sacrifice every morning and every night, because of what it was teaching consistency. You got to be consistent as opposed to inconsistent. Another commentary talks about that he was a tzaddik with God and with his generation. The other commentary says that there are many people who are very, very scrupulous with kashrus, as an example, when they're at home. But we're on the road, or they're on a cruise, right? So Noach was not like that. Noach, whatever the level he had, once again, he had a level. He didn't say, I'm on vacation, I don't need to put on tefillin. I'm on vacation, I don't need to, right, do this, that, the other. He was consistent. He had 3 kids, Shem, Cham, and Yafes. Shem was not the oldest, but he had the most integrity. Shem is Seth, is what they no, that's Shase. Shem is actually Semite. That's where the word anti-Semite comes, or Semite, Semitic. So Jews, Muslims can trace our lineage to Shem in particular. Cham was more of Africa. That's where he sort of ended up. And Yafes was Europe, right? So the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant was from Yafes, right? Mugabe is from Cham, and Moses was from Shem. And God said God looked, and he saw Kihishkes Kolbasa, that everybody there's such moral decay. That's exactly what happened. There was moral decay. It says even the animals weren't acting. It was like the planet was not aligned. It was misaligned. And God said, you know what? I'm Kate's Kolbasa. I'm done. I can't stand it. So he says, I'm going to destroy the world. And God told Noach to make a teva, to make an ark. And God told him it was God's design, how big he wanted it. And it had 3 stories. The first story was for the human beings. The second story was for the animals in different stalls, right? And the third story was for the refuse. Nowadays, we would never do that. You would not put the refuse in the lower bunk, because you have to store high in transit, which is an acronym. Right, but that's where the refuse went, and Noach went about building the ark. Here's the interesting thing: is in the Talmud. They mention that Noach built the ark himself. That he built the ark himself. God told him to build the ark, and he built the ark himself, and it took him more than 100 years to build the ark. More than 100 years. So remember, this guy lived to 930 or 950, whatever it was. So the question is, why did he? There you go, much better. The question is, why didn't he elicit help? So the Rogachover, Rabbi Rosen, who was just a brilliant man, he passed 1920s, 1930s, something like that. The Rogachover says is that a non-Jew, as opposed to a Jew. So take a Jew, for example. A Jew, one person can make Kiddush. Everybody answers Amen, and we're all included in that Kiddush. One person makes Hamotzi. One person blows the shofar. Everybody is. With a non-Jew, it's not like that. With a non-Jew, you're given a commandment. You have to do the commandment, or you have to not do the commandment. You cannot say, well, so-and-so is doing it for me, etc. So Noach was commanded by God to build the ark. God didn't tell him that I want you to build the ark together with your sons. So Noach built the ark.
Should have hired subcontractors.
They couldn't.
I mean,
that's the point. He couldn't. The Rogachover spells it out. And it's interesting. You have to wait till the 1920s for the Rogachover. That was his brilliance. The Rogachover says, hold on a second. It's based on halacha that we know. why he didn't. So he built it himself. And as I always say, I had the same contractor that Noah used. And the same guy that painted the Sistine Chapel is the same guy that painted my house, 16 years. So he made this ark to God's specs. The ark was larger than a football field, was probably 2 football fields, and the ark was made. It was made basically with wood, and the wood went, just like you make a boat today. There's wood going this way, and then you have supports, and the ark was made that. And God said, "I'm going to bring a mabul. I'm going to bring a flood." Now, God could have chosen many other ways to destroy the world, right? He could have just
the property of water. Water is the holy thing.
correct. So God could have made an atomic bomb. God could have made anything, and nuclear fusion. It's not difficult for God. It's not difficult for Iran, right? God could have made it, but He used the mabul specifically because mabul, as it spells out in the Kabbalah, from the Kabbalah, is that mabul, God basically mikved the world. He said, okay, so it's impure. The world, there's death, there's destruction, there's immorality. You got to get away from all this. And therefore he chose water. And it was 40 days and 40 nights, which is interesting. A mikvah has to have 40 saw, the same 40. A saw is about 2 gallons. So the minimum size for a mikvah is 80 gallons. We actually put in more, so in case, if you have 80 gallons and someone goes into the mikvah and they have water in their body, and now you have 79.9, it's not a kosher mikvah anymore. So you put in a lot more. But the minimum required is 80 gallons, which is 40 saw. So it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, during that period of 100 plus years that Noach was building the ark, was actually it was an opportunity for repentance, because people asked Noah, "What are you doing?" So he goes, "I'm building a boat." He goes, "Why are you building a boat?" He says, "God's going to destroy the world." He says, "Who?" Allah, right? So he said, "What's going on?" He says he doesn't like the way the world is. He doesn't like the anarchy, etc. So it was an opportunity, but instead Noach was laughed at as this weirdo, right?
But so why is he being criticized? If you did outreach to the world and just doesn't move, and if you don't change, you get brought.
So Alex asked a question. So Rashi and the Talmud actually, they berate Noach a little bit, right? They say, yeah, he was a tzaddik in his generation. Compared to Abraham, he would be a nothing. They put this guy down. So I think one explanation, this is the Rebbe gives, is that Noach waited for people to come to him. When God told him to build the ark, Noah should have gone to people to say, "Look, I've the end is near, right? The end is near." Instead, he went about, and only when people came to him,
Can
and
I be Noah's advocate?
yeah, of course,
God didn't tell Noah to go out.
yeah,
So
God didn't tell him not to.
he just followed the order.
Yeah, but when you build this huge building and people ask you questions and he gives them answers, they should.
Yeah, but I
Right.
think there's this,
There's more to it also.
yeah, but I think there's a little bit of, I guess, an integrity thing. I mean, for him to build something and then go around being like, yep, the world's gonna get flooded, look at me,
So,
versus people like saying, what's going, I feel like either way.
So
it's a
there's-
lose-lose.
it probably is a lose-lose, but here's the other component. Is the Noach, as opposed to Abraham. Noach was a monotheist, and so was Abraham, a monotheist. Everybody around him was a pagan or polytheistic or whatever. Noach did no outreach whatsoever. Abraham had a tent, people came in, he tried to speak to them. Noach just led his happy life. He was an accountant, he went to work and he came home, and there was no he was enthused, but he didn't share his enthusiasm. Also, Noach, when God said, "I'm going to destroy the world," what did Abraham say? when God told Abraham, I'm going to destroy Sodom, Sodom and Gomorrah, what did Abraham say?
Maybe you can save it.
He says, come on, Hashem, with the judge of the entire world not do justice. What are you doing? I'm just but ashes and dust, but please, God, what if there's 10 people, right? God told Noah, I'm going to destroy the world. And Noah said, okay. What he should have done was he should have turned to God and said, what are you talking about, Willis? Right? What do you mean destroy the world? There was nothing. Noah was just a simple son of Simon, right? And God said will destroy the world. Noah said, okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, one other thing in defense of Noah here. I mean, like,
I'm not anti-Noah.
I know, but I'm just saying, it's like, how do you question God? I mean, like, you have Abraham who's so high that he could say why, and here's a guy, I mean, we don't say
Alright.
why kosher, we just.
No. However, so it's not kosher. We pray every day. We pray every day to God to rebuild the temple. We pray every day to God, please God, don't let us err and get sucked in with bad people. We pray every day to God, please bring salvation to the world. We pray every day. Right? The Noah didn't pray. Abraham reached out and prayed. Moses reached out and prayed. Noah didn't. That's what the Rebbe says, is that Noah he wasn't a bad guy. He just didn't do the extra mile. He didn't go that extra mile. So anyway, God told him to build an ark. The ark, the design was by God. God gave him, whether it's by prophecy or, as he was building it, God moved the wood from here to there. But I don't know exactly. But Noah, who was, they say my boss was a carpenter. That's probably where it's really from. So Noah built this ark, and God told him that the animals will come to you. The animals will come to you. He says the animals that are not pure will come 2 by 2. The animals that are pure will come in 7 pairs. Now, at that point, there was no kosher, not kosher. There was no purity, impurity in terms of animals. So God was saying what was going to happen in the future. That the animals that are impure and the animals that are pure, right then and there. Now, right then and there, from Adam all the way to Noah, 1,600 years, they were vegetarians. Right? They were forbidden, not as if they had a choice. They were forbidden to eat any type of meat. They survived on chickpeas, tofu, and they survived on I don't know what else someone survives on. Right. They survived on a little bit of mango, and and therefore when the world was destroyed, they didn't really care, because it's not as if they had good food to look forward to the next morning, right? I know that if I'm going to have pisca, to have a great steak, I can't wait. Thursday night I'm gonna go. Oh, I'm looking forward to it all week. They had nothing to. You want to bring the flood? Bring the flood. I don't care. So I'm not gonna have sunflower seeds. I'm not. Right. Oh my goodness. Pretend that didn't, hold on, no recording. Pretend that didn't happen, Alex. So there was no idea of kosher, not kosher, etc. There was nothing like that at all. Nothing like that. No idea of kosher and non-kosher. But God was saying what was to come. So the animals came 2 by 2. The animals came 7 and 7, and they came into the ark up the ramp, and it started to rain. Noah still did not get into the ark. God told him, Noah, get into the ark. Go. It's getting rough. Get into the ark. So Noah went into the ark. Now, so Rashi says, even Noah was katnei emunah. He was a little faith, and he didn't believe the flood would come. Others interpret Rashi to say that Noah was such a great guy. is that he felt that even the Katnei Amuna, even those that had little faith, would eventually believe. That's what he was waiting for. But alas, it didn't happen, and he went into the ark. Now the Torah tells us that there was that they made it. He made a tzohar. A tzohar, Rashi says there's two opinions what a tzohar was. Some say it was a gemstone that magnified light. So there would be light on into the ark. And others say it was a window. So it all depends on what the reason why Noach was saved. If he was saved because he was truly righteous and deserved to be saved, then it could be a window. He was righteous and he could look out on the suffering. If he was saved strictly because he was the best of the bunch, then it had to be opaque. It had to be like a gem that you couldn't really see through. It was distorted. It was translucent, and so it all depends. So it's unclear. It's unclear what this Soha was, and there's two opinions. It all depends. Remember Lot's wife, right? Lot's wife turned back, and she wasn't allowed to turn back because she wasn't worthy of being saved, except for just being. Lot was a nephew of Abraham, and Mrs. Lot was Mrs. Lot, and therefore she was saved. But to look back, that's chutzpah. So that's why they say that Noach was not allowed to look onto the perils, And by the way, most people do look. When there's a car accident, etc. Right? You have the right. You have the voyeurs, right? So Hashem didn't want voyeurism. So according to them, there was no they couldn't see out. Regardless, they brought in food, and this is one of the miracles of the ark, is that God said, bring all food that can be eaten. But to bring in food, which went on the first floor with the human beings, to feed, right, how many species of animals? 9,000 species of different animals, and to feed them, there had to be a lot of food. One of the miracles is that the food was there when it was needed. They didn't have to bring in enough for a year for 9,000 species of animals, or however many species, but they did have to bring in what they did have to bring. Noah, the very fact that he walked into the ark was a tremendous, tremendous thing, because he was going now into uncharted waters, literally. Right? It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and as the Torah tells us, minatahom, it came. There was volcanic eruptions where water from below the earth also came up. So there's waters from above, waters from below, and it just completely decimated. They say that these were, a lot of the hills and the mountains was created by the flood because of the. It said it also, carbon dating was messed up because the water sat over the earth for a full year. And that is the reason they say that they found seashells on Mount Everest, is because there was a flood, and there was a nasty flood. And it was for 40 days and 40 nights, but then it continued for a full year. And it's interesting. Noach was when he started his thing, he was 500 years old, and he was it was 600 years old by 601 years old, I think, by the time he got out of the ark. So it rained, and the earth was destroyed. According to the Talmud, which the Talmud, Rashi quotes the Talmud and the Midrash, is that the water was not cold. The water was actually, in some parts, the water was hot. So it really caused destruction. So any like wooden huts, it wasn't just it completely, not just there was wooden debris. It actually, the wood, the water was boiling. Not around the ark. Not around the ark. It was not boiling. That's what it says. So it was a Tohaim Rabbah as the Torah says. It was tremendous. The uproar from the earth, from underneath the earth. Perhaps that's where the Mariana Trench comes from, right? It was just like it just disintegrated the earth and just water just. Now they were forbidden. That when the Torah tells Noach, you and your 3 sons go into the ark. Nama, you and your 3 daughters-in-law go into the ark. It was said separately. They were forbidden from having from copulating and for procreating in the ark. That is true. That is halacha today. Halacha today is if there's starvation, if the world or the country is suffering from hunger, you are forbidden. You are forbidden to bring a child into the world. So here the world was in distress and crisis. They weren't allowed to. So Noah slept with his sons, and Nama slept with the daughters-in-law. Right? There was and the twain shall never mix. It covered, as the Torah attests, it covered the highest mountain. It covered the highest mountain by at least 15 amas. 15 amas, you would say, is probably about 28 feet or 26 feet, something like that. It was completely covered. And so it went for many days. Then it finally rested on Mount Ararat. Mount Ararat, the closest we can understand where Mount Ararat is, somewhere in Turkey, and alleged there is a outline of an ark, and you can Google it. It's actually fascinating. That is based on the side of the mountain, and it's very hard to get to because it's on the wrong side of the mountain. Also, it's very hard to get to, and it was in Ararat, but they had to wait. Even when it rested, they couldn't see dry land. And the only way for Noah to test is if the land is drying, is he sent out a raven. He sent out a raven. The raven circled the ark and came back. There was no resting place, right? Then he sent out the dove. The dove did go further, came back, no resting place. So he waited a couple more weeks. He waited a couple more weeks, and then he sent out another dove, and the dove came back with an olive leaf. That's when Noah knew that there was. That's when Noah knew that it was there was dry land and things started to grow again. However, he didn't leave the ark until he was told to. Right? A couple reasons, a couple of thoughts here. One is it says by Yiskar Hashem ba'adai, Hashem locked him in the ark. Hashem was one who closed the window, closed the door. Hashem, right? Hashem closed it. So he wasn't going to stop. I'm not opening it. God closed it. I'm not opening it until God is ready. So that's one thought. The other thought is, which is we discussed yesterday, is that human beings are notoriously for liking order. They don't like change. When you're quarantined in a boat, or when you're quarantined in a place, and you're right, for prisoners, right? Prisoners, when they get out, they're not comfortable. They want to go right back in, because that's what they're used to. It's too much change. It's hard on them. Noah said, you know what? We could live like this. There's no reason for us to, now that the flood is over, okay, so there's no threat of, but we'll just stay in the ark. And God said, no, that's not. And likewise, sometimes we have to kick our kids out of their crib, right? Yeah, it's time for you to move on, right? I know I speak to plenty of parents, and they argue with their kids that they say once you graduate college, you live at home, you need to pay rent. Right. Me personally, don't subscribe to that philosophy. My kids are welcome anytime. They have their keys to the house, that anything and everything they want. But there are people who feel that if they don't do that, your kids will never leave the house. So God actually had to tell him, get out. Say Minateva. You, your wife, and your kids, get out. So Noah walked down the ramp, and you must have, can you imagine his, firstly, it probably looked like Hawaii, right? Water all around, and right? He was almost like in the Maldives, where you have that hotel in the middle of the, right? Or Bali. So when they got out of the ark, and the animals all got out of the ark, God blessed the animals and says, okay, now it's time for you to procreate. Animals, get to it, right? And send them out, and they all went their way. Noah stayed near the ark. And the first thing he did was he took the kosher animals, the animals that came in 14, and he offered them as a sacrifice to God. He said, there's a reason why God told me to bring extra. So he offered a sacrifice to God. He was forbidden to eat meat. So he offered it as an ola, almost like the whole animal. He offered it to God. And the Torah tells us that Hashem reach nechayach. God said, a gift for me, right? 21-year-old Scotch for me, right? And right, God said, you know what? I recognize something. He says, I recognize Yetzer Ha'adam, the inclination of man, Ra min urav. Man has a tendency to do bad, not because for bad sake, because man is very self-interest, right? Have much self-interest. Man man wants to be mankind. I mean, from young. The rabbis say, it's interesting. We have a bat mitzvah today, but the rabbis say that when a child is born, a child is not born with a Yetzer Tov, with a good inclination, boy or girl. It's born with a Yetzer Hara, a natural inclination, right? And then slowly, it gets little dosages of self-awareness that and revelations that the world doesn't evolve around you, but there's also others. It's not just you. So a baby has no consciousness. Baby just wants to eat. A little toddler wants to play, and someone takes its toys, it's going to cry and scream, right? The concept of sharing doesn't come naturally, because Ra min urav. Slowly over time, when the child is bar or bat mitzvah, and this is what we actually celebrate, when the child is bar or bat mitzvah, that's when selflessness comes into play. That's when they're taught, no, buddy, you have to keep mitzvahs. It may distract you from Xbox. It may distract you from Barbie. It may distract you from sports. But you got to do mitzvahs, right? And that's why I think we find many of the bar mitzvah kids have a project, right? And if you notice, it's always about helping someone else. And it's very consistent with what's happening to them. It's the idea is they're bar mitzvah, so therefore help others. You're no longer a kid. It can't be all about you, right? Now, parents are obligated to inculcate their kids as they're growing up. So therefore, a parent is obligated to say, okay, it's make your own dinner night. I'm not going to give you everything on a silver spoon. That's the job of a parent, is to prepare the child for bar bat mitzvahhood, to prepare a child to become an adult, to prepare a child to become a upstanding member of society. That's the parent's job. A child is not obligated in mitzvahs. A child that technically doesn't have to eat kosher. It's a child. But you prepare the child. You can't expect the child to flip on a dime. So just like you prepare it in mitzvahs, you prepare it in all mitzvahs. Sharing and caring. That is what it's all about. God told So that's what we celebrate, the bar mitzvah, is that now the godly soul is fully enmeshed with, now they have true free will. Until now, they didn't have free will. Until now, it was the child just focused in on itself, a little bit of schoolwork. The Torah told the God blessed man, and he told him, okay, pru revu, it's time for you to procreate, and it's time for you to rebuild the world. So it's interesting. The very first mitzvah God gave to Adam was pru revu, have kids. The very first mitzvah God gave to Noach was pru revu, to have kids. It's an obligation to have kids, if you can. And if you're not, then maybe, God chose you to be very special, as they say, and not to have children, to do something else. Like the Rebbe, for example, couldn't have kids, and for whatever reason, God chose the Rebbe and Rebbetzin, so the Rebbe made lemonade out of lemons, right? He had a bunch of spiritual kids. But one has to have kids. It's interesting, there's the halacha, what is considered fulfilling the mitzvah? So there's different opinions. One opinion is you have to have a boy and a girl. That's not always possible. It's not right? So another opinion is that you have to have progeny that's a boy and a girl. So in other words, let's say you had two boys. Let's say you had three boys. Let's say you had two girls, three girls, right? Then your children must have in their mix a boy and a girl. What happens if that's not possible? So then the grandchildren have to have. That's how you know you fulfill the mitzvah, is when you have because of you have a male and a female, which in turn means they will procreate, right? So it was a biblical command. God also at this time told them that I am now allowing you to eat meat, right? You work so hard, you serve them, and he said, I'm now allowing you to eat meat. However, just because you're allowed to eat meat, just because you're allowed to eat meat doesn't mean that you're allowed to kill an animal without mercy. And one of the famous Noachide laws, there were 7 Noachide laws. One of the famous ones, and it's right here in the 4th Aliyah, is that you cannot eat. You cannot kill an animal and eat it. You have to do it all the way. You can't torture, right? That's why when we slaughter an animal in Judaism, right? If the shochet, if the ritual slaughter, doesn't matter what type of it, whether it's a bird or fowl or small or big, cannot hesitate. Once you're committed, you have to go all the way without hesitation. If you hesitated, this animal is not kosher because you caused it pain.
Did you look fire?
Oh no.
Okay, darling. Did you sleep?
I hear noise. Hold on.
I
Okay.
did. Looked like it was good I stayed up. Sometimes if you try to sleep and you're not tired, that's just like the worst.
I know.
So.
And you said the dinner last night was good, right?
My shrimps, Daddy said his steak wasn't, his skirt steak wasn't so good.
Why not
But that's between you and me. Why would you order skunk steak there?
I'm on my phone. I don't know how to mute.
And I told you.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I know how to do it on the computer. Give me a second.
Look.
Anybody know?
I'm muted. I'm not even part of the.
All right, whatever. I don't know. We'll just have to. If I mute myself, participants. There you go. Okay, so okay, sorry about that. So so you're not allowed to kill, you're not allowed to torture an animal, you're not allowed to put a lobster in a hot pot, and it's because it's you have to kill it quickly. That's the idea. The only animal that really you don't have to kill quickly is the fish. So the fish, when you take it out, even though the fish seems to like flounder and flap, and you're not obligated It's that's okay. You don't have to. But if you're going to slaughter an animal, fish blood, by the way, is not considered blood. Fish blood is parith. You can mix a little fish blood in your milk. Um, I'm not sure. Then God says that because I'm allowing you to eat meat, and this is possibly the reason why he didn't for 1600 years. God said, because I'm allowing you to eat meat, I don't want blood to be cheap. Right? I don't want you to just, if you kill a human being, you're going to have to answer to me. For killing a human being, I myself, I'm going to come after you. Right? Then the Torah also says, and just because you see that killings and all this, you are not allowed to take your own life. Right? So that is that's all in that aliyah because there was, God kind of softened up and allowed them to eat meat. He was concerned that he would that the man would take it a step further. So he made it very clear that none of that. Now, after Noah offered up the sacrifice, God told Noah that I'm going to make a promise with you that I'm never going to destroy the world by flood. Right? I can destroy Phuket, or Phuket, I don't know how to pronounce it. I can destroy that, but I'm not going to destroy the world in totality. I'm not going to. Right? Asteroid maybe, but flood, no. I'm not going to destroy the world by flood. I will never do that again. And I'm going to offer you a sign that I'll never do it again. And God placed a keshes in the sky. So by tradition, we have it that a keshes is a rainbow. Right? That's the tradition, is that, and therefore, halachically, when we see a rainbow, we make a blessing. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who thankfully remembers his promise, and he keeps his promise and doesn't desecrate it. Right? So when we see a rainbow, it's actually very sobering for us. Right? So while a rainbow is multicolored and it could be a gorgeous rainbow, there's a double rainbow, it's actually should be a little sobering. Of course, scientists would tell you, no, a rainbow is water going through the prism and the sunlight and the rain and the wetness and the other.
The rainbow cleans the atmosphere.
Oh, there you go. The rainbow cleans the atmosphere. So
kills bacteria. It cleans the whole atmosphere. So when you see a rainbow come down and it comes down, the whole ozone becomes cleansed. So it's a cleansing.
Okay. So thank you, Steve. Anyway, so when we see a rainbow, we're actually sober and we make a blessing. Now, after Noah offered the sacrifice to God and he got that promise that he won't destroy the world, Noah went on to help himself. And the very first thing he did was he got drunk. So he took with him, food. And one of the things he took with him was grapes. And whether he made the wine on the ark or he made the right after, it's unclear. But basically, he got drunk. Now, he was considered debased because of it, that he got drunk. However, I don't, if you're in a boat for a year and it's not your choice and the rest of the world died, I would venture that I probably would say l'chaim, and so would you, and whoever was on the boat would say l'chaim together. But here's the problem: he drank to excess. Right. So once again, saying l'chaim, right? The word l'chaim, by the way, so has two yuds in the middle: chet, yud, yud, mem. The two yuds refer to two people, two yuds, two yidden, right? If you just say drink alone, and it'd be one yud, that's not chaim, that's chaim or something. Chaim is only when you're drinking alone, right? It's the lonely, it's a loneliness drink. It's a Billy Joel song. They're sharing a drink they call loneliness, but it's better than drinking alone. So it's you and your cup. But when you say l'chaim with someone else, that's okay. So Noah, he got drunk, and he was sprawled naked on his cot. The two sons, so the Canaan, the son of Ham, saw him. He told his father. His father came and laughed. So Ham saw his father. I'm sorry, Ham saw and laughed. Not Ham, I confused that. Ham saw his father and laughed. And he told his brothers. His brother said, "There's nothing to laugh at. Our father's sitting there in shame, right, sprawled out like a drunkard, a naked drunkard on the street." This is not. Remember, they had the concept of clothes, and they had the concept of covering up with a loincloth long before Noah. So they covered him. They walked backwards. They turned their face backwards, and they covered him. And the Baal Shem Tov says that that's what we need to do. We have to learn a lesson from it. When we see somebody debased, we see somebody is not to judge him, try and help him. But you don't laugh at him, or you don't mock him, or you help, you cover, you work with him. You don't just laugh and do nothing. Laughing and doing nothing. That's what was so egregious, is that he didn't help, he didn't remedy. He didn't do anything worthwhile. He just laughed, right? Right. He just laughed. If you if you do something concrete, then you do something concrete. So those who if we have a drug problem in the United States or in this city, we got to do something about it. We can't just laugh about it. So the two sons, they didn't judge him. They turned their face. They didn't look. They didn't judge, but they helped. Noach got word of it, and Noach cursed his son Ham, and he said, you are the one debased. You are the one who has lacked sensitivity, and you're the one. And he says, you shall be inferior to your brothers. So Shem and Yafes were the two brothers. He had Nachas.
Can I just say something on that one?
No. I don't really want you to say anything on this.
No,
topic.
not that. It's not negative. It's not negative. He cursed Ham. He cursed Canaan. He cursed his fourth son. He didn't curse Ham. His curse was to Canaan, and that's why Canaan is the separate cities. Oh, you go on with it, but the curse is on Canaan, the fourth son, because that was supposed to be the fourth son that was supposed to be made by him, but because of the castration.
Right. So cursing Canaan is cursing Ham, right? Right. So his proud lineage was from Shem, Yafes, and he did not like Canaan. Now it's interesting. The Torah then goes into the children of Shem, Ham, and Yafes, right? And now a lot of these names are difficult names, but we recognize some of them, right? So for example, Yafes, right? He's one of his sons. He's Ashkenaz, right? Germans, right? Greek, Yavan, Greeks, right? So we they clearly these and Ham was Cush, Ethiopia, Egypt, right? Canaan. So we know where so some of these names are still around. And so Yafes, that's why I say they were the Europeans, because they came from Yafes.
He also mentions the Philistines.
Yes, it does. Yes, mentions the Philistines, right? And Canaan, it talks about who who his kids were, which were the 7 nations that they were obligated. The Jews were obligated to get rid of, because these 7 nations stole it from Shem. It's a long story. We'll go into it maybe next week. So he had a bunch of kids, and he saw many kids and grandkids, and then he passed. The Torah tells us that one of the descendants was Nimrod. So Nimrod was the first self-appointed ruler. Nimrod was the Kim Jong-un, whatever his name is, of his time. He was a tyrant, Nimrod had a fiefdom or fiefdom, and he ruled by the sword, and he became king. He became the ruler. He became the chief, the despot. And one of his greatest things that he sought to accomplish was to become God of the world. He wanted people to worship him. So not just as a king, but something more than that. So because of his inferiority complex, he said we have to wage war with God. So the next and the end of Noah is where Nimrod built a tower. And they built this tower. They said, let us make a name for ourselves. Let us, and the commentaries are replete with what he was trying to do. He said that the earth belongs to us and the heavens belong to God, but we're going to change that. The heavens and the earth are going to belong to us. And they made a tower. Now I'll tell you something interesting. Yonason Eibschitz, he was born in 1690 and he passed in 1764, I think. He writes about this. He writes about this Tower of Babel that they built. And he says, so what they sought to do was build a tower where they would leave the atmosphere and be able to basically, because there'll be no atmosphere and no gravity, the pull of gravitational pull, they'll be able to fly upwards unlimited and show God that they're there in his area and his thing, which I find fascinating because Newton didn't come to much later. So there must have been some other, I guess Newton made gravity famous, but Yonason Eibschitz spoke about gravity in his writings in Hebrew. He spoke about the gravitational pull, right? He spoke about the gravitational pull way before Newton. So God said, you know what? I'm gonna change all that. Yeah, Robin, what's the question? So Robin asked why an olive branch? So I think that's a great question. So God was trying to well, he brought it with him into the ark, but God, I think, was trying to teach Noah a lesson with the olive branch. He says that while being right, while being a Noah, while you're great, it's what you produce is greater. So he was showing him an olive branch to teach him that an olive is one thing, but the branch is the branch of a tree and the leaf that produces the olives. So he was teaching Noah a lesson. This is one of the commentaries that you have to, you have to focus on your kids. You have to make sure that it's not just you that's a tzaddik, but you have to make sure that the olives reproduce. And make sure your kids are also righteous. So he built this tower. And they waged war with God. Of course, it was a no match. What God did was he changed everybody's language. There were a total of 70 languages, and because they could not communicate with each other, they couldn't fulfill this building rather than kill them. So it's interesting. Fighting against God, they weren't killed. Fighting against man to man, they were killed. They were destroyed in the flood. But fighting against God, God said, you know what? Let me do something different.
It's like, if you're a parent, somebody, says something to you or whatever, so fine, I'm an adult, I can take care of it, But when you do something to the kids,
right,
then all hell breaks.
Right, then all hell, right. So don't start with my kids, right?
Rabbi, he didn't complete the building, correct?
No, he didn't complete the building.
They didn't complete the building, right? Correct. God stopped
God
them in the process, right?
God did not allow him to complete the building.
Right. Okay.
He did not complete the building, and so now they could no longer communicate. This is where communities started. So you had people who spoke the same language sort of went away, like 10 miles away, and they pitched their tents. You had people who spoke, the original 70 languages, and I don't, the original 70 languages, I don't know what it was, but, Onga Boga, I don't know what it was and how sophisticated it was, it doesn't say, but they moved, and then from there, they started to move further and further away and started to explore other parts of the continent. How many continents were there then? So different commentaries, some people say that it was the flood that caused the continents. It was originally one large continent. And then because of the flood, because of this, the turmoil, that different continents were caused. And now they had 7 continents, or maybe they had 6 continents, one broke off later, whatever. I'm not, could have been 5, could have been 4, but that was the beginning of continents. And then they eventually, the Vikings went to the north, and sorry, right, and they eventually started to make their own colonies in different parts of the world. This is where it began. It began a couple hundred years after the flood, and it's called, so there's Dur Mabul, the generation of the Mabul, the flood, but then there's a Dur Haflaga, the generation of dispersion. What's interesting is that one of the kids, I believe it's Shem's kids, was called Peleg. He was called dispersion. The Shem knew that there was going to be something was going to happen, and we would not all live in one city. That we would flee New York City and move to the south. No, that's de Blasio. That's something else. Sorry, but they dispersed and they moved to different parts of the world, and from there they moved even further. So that's how it began. And then the last thing that gives more of the lineage, and there was 10 generations after Noah. People were still not behaving. People still didn't believe in God once Noah and his people died out. And the Torah tells us that a guy, Terach, was born. Terach had 3 kids. Some people say that they were triplets. Some people say that they weren't. That Abraham was the oldest brother, and Terach gave birth to 3 kids. One of them was Abraham, who married Yiscah, who the Torah tells us is Sarah, Sarai, and that's how the Torah portion ends. So next week, we get introduced to Abraham's life and as the patriarch of the Jewish people. I bid you a good week. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock, please God, we'll have the Genesis class. Will continue on Facebook Live, and then it'll be recorded. This will too will be placed on the Chai Academy. We're in the process of setting up our own YouTube channel, so you'll be able to subscribe. And please God, same time next week. Early voting has begun. May God bless our country. God bless the United States. We should heal from this, from our different factions and fractions, and may God give us a truly United States. Be well, be safe. God bless you all. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock, and then hopefully we'll start the Tanya class. A little difficult, but we'll start the Tanya class again. Be well.